The sound of voices speaking urgently into telephones, the column printer grumbling out an article from the Reuters, all seemed to say, "Hurry, hurry, hurry." Abby's pulse picked up the rhythm. She longed to sit at one of the desks and get to work. She smelled cigarette smoke, stronger than the tobacco they smoked at home, the smoldering coal in the marble fireplace at one end of the room, and, as a top note, the acrid smell of deadline-induced sweat. The room was rectangular, with high ceilings and long, elegant windows at odds with the jumble of desks, leaning stacks of newspapers, and the 6 men at work on phones, typewriters, or with pencil and paper. There was a single woman in the room, a black telephone receiver wedged between her shoulder and her ear as she scribbled notes. Once, this must have been the townhouse of a rich aristo, perhaps one of those who lost their heads in the Revolution. Instead of housing rich dukes and duchesses wearing silks and dancing the quadrille, the room now hosted a slovenly crew of American reporters. Her excitement dimmed when she faced her new editor. Walter Strutt did not rise when she reached his desk. He was lean, his skin so tight that when he sucked in smoke, she was uncomfortably reminded of the shape of his skull. He was so thin and gray, she suspected he had gastric trouble. He squinted at her through his smoke with no hint of warmth or welcome. She leaned across his desk with her hand outstretched anyway, because she had manners, even if he had none. "I'm Abigail Dixon. I'm so pleased to meet you." She thought for a second he'd ignore the friendly gesture. In the end, he squeezed her hand briefly and let go. Somewhat deflated, she sat down on the hard wooden chair facing his paper-strewn desk. He didn't say a word, just picked up Uncle Charles's letter and glanced at it as though her arrival was a surprise, though she knew she was expected. "What are your interests, Miss Dixon?" he asked, finally. If he was any less enthusiastic, they'd be nailing the lid on his coffin. "The latest hairstyles? Fashion?" He took in her gray tweed skirt and straw-colored woolen sweater, the long brown hair she'd worn in the same simple updo since she was 16. "Perhaps pets? Cooking?" Pets? Cooking? She shook her head so hard the pins threatened to fly out of her hair. "I want to write hard news, especially as it affects women." She leaned forward. "The French Union for Women's Suffrage is organizing a march. I want to talk to women on the street, cover the demonstration. I've already spoken to the organizers." Pretty darn good since she'd only been in Paris for 5 days. A young reporter knocked into the back of her chair as he ran past. He glanced at the huge clock on the wall, swore, then sat at one of the desks without stopping to remove his jacket or hat. He flipped open his notepad, then bashed typewriter keys with the index and middle fingers of each hand. It sounded like he was lining up words and shooting them down with a Gatling gun. The editor lit another cigarette. "Miss Dixon, I appreciate your enthusiasm." His tone reminded her of the bank managers when he'd explained about the family money being all gone. Patronizing, and as though he couldn't wait for the interview to be over. "Everybody calls me Abby." "Well, Abby, first, the women's suffrage vote won't pass because the Senate will block it." He sounded so certain, when the vote wouldn't be held for weeks yet. She checked the urge to ask him sweetly where he kept his crystal ball. "But that's just wrong. American and British women have had the vote for 5 years. We should—" He held up a hand, stopping the flow of her words. "Second, our paper caters to the expat community and to the folks back home. You're here to write for the women's pages. Tell the girls about the latest hairstyles and the Paris fashions. We have seasoned newsmen for the hard stuff." The seasoned newsman who'd just arrived got stuck for a word and knocked his fist against the back of his head so his hat wobbled back and forth. The Paris office was much smaller than that of its parent broadsheet, but she'd believed that meant more opportunity. She held her teeth tight.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.